Hello, everyone, and thank you for stopping by. My name is Laura. I'm the person who started that Stitch for Ukraine hashtag. Thank you so much for all your support. I got a lot of really lovely shout outs. I see there are nearly 1,500 posts on this hashtag on Instagram. And I did a small Facebook fundraiser for United Help Ukraine, and I was able to raise $3,110. So thank you for everyone who donated. But I've also seen a bunch of other fundraising initiatives, and that also makes me really happy. The only reason I use Facebook is their fundraising feature is if the nonprofit is already registered with Facebook, it just goes directly to them. They don't take out any fees. So, yes, Facebook has a whole bunch of stuff, but that one feature is nice. So I wanted to use for that. And every time I see someone else doing something good, that makes me happy. To remind you, I did put together a Google Doc of resources. There's a couple different links about good places to get your news, different ways you can donate, other things you can do. But also there is a bunch of links about different Ukrainian designers you can support. So if you haven't checked that out already, I recommend you click on that in the description box below. In the beginning, I did update it fairly frequently, though of course I have been updating it a little bit less frequently, and it's been a little bit more stable in its information. A few things I just wanted to remind you in case you had not encountered this already. Remember, it is Ukraine, not the Ukraine. In the English language, we use the word the when we're referring to a part of a greater whole. So we're talking about the United States, we'll say the Midwest because we're referring to a region within. So the Ukraine is what we used to call it when it was still a part of the former Soviet Union, but now that it is its own independent country, we remove that and just call it Ukraine. Also, the capital is Kyiv, spelled K-I-E-V, which is an Americanization of the Ukrainian word for their capital. Kiev, spelled K-Y-I-V, that is the Americanization of the Russian word. So both of these things, calling it Ukraine and Kyiv, that is a way we recognize that is a sovereign and independent nation. Just like you want people to say your name correctly, use the proper pronouns and titles, we want to recognize its independence and identity. So these are all important things to remember. You might have noticed the war is still going on. It's been going on for over a month. The world sucks. You might be wondering, what can you do? And yeah, there's a lot going on. But despite that, there are still things everyone, myself included, can still do. Really, these boil down to donate to organizations that are actively doing things and in response to this conflict. You can contact your representatives, remind them to welcome refugees with open arms. You can also continue to spread the word, use the hashtag Stitch for Ukraine that helps show solidarity, remind others and that this is an important issue and help everyone band together. And lastly, we can stay informed about the conflict. So let's talk about donations for a little bit. If you want to donate money, which great if you do, the best thing you can do is donate directly to active aid organizations. So those are organizations that already have people in place, ways to get stuff from one place to people who need it. I chose to donate to United Help Ukraine. If you couldn't tell based on my accent, I am an American. So I chose an American organization because they are closer to me. It's easy to send them money. And this particular organization has been well established for several years, and they have relationships with Ukraine. So that's how I was choosing it. I do recommend that wherever you are in the world, do a little bit of research and figure out who is doing the work in your country, because that's going to be a little bit easier. But also, after you do a little bit of work and maybe you found a couple organizations that have people on the ground, from there, you can't go wrong. So don't go overboard on the research. Once you found a couple good people that fit the bill, excellent. There are a couple of fundraising patterns out there. And I admit I have bought a few of them myself, but I don't really view those as true donations because whenever we have these fundraising pattern, we are creating a middleman, and there is whoever is hosting the actual pattern, they're taking a cut. So people on Gumroad or Etsy, like Gumroad and Etsy, are taking a cut from each of those sales. So I'm really just viewing that as I'm buying a pattern. And none of those purchases are really going to save anyone. It's those direct donations that are going to make our biggest hit. Of course, we're all stitchers. So the reason I'm buying these patterns is because I'm going to be stitching anyway. So if I'm going to be doing this activity, I might as well redirect that to help show my support and remind others that this is an important issue that we should all be caring about. I do want to encourage you that if you do want to stitch a traditional Ukrainian design, which that is a great way to celebrate their culture in the midst of this really terrible war, that you do the research and buy that traditional Ukrainian pattern from a Ukrainian designer. So these designs already exist, and especially if you want to stitch traditional cultures, you want to go to the source, partially because you're just gonna get a better pattern because the designer has more knowledge of it, but also you want that monetary benefit to go to someone who came from the culture and not other places. I highly encourage everyone to have multicultural stitching in your life, but it really does help when you go to someone who came from that culture originally, because you are going to get a better pattern there. And of course, like, I know it can sometimes feel a little silly, but using the hashtag Stitch for Ukraine does help because it shows how many people are excited and are doing the same thing, and it helps build momentum and show that this is an issue we should all be concerned about. The next thing you want to be thinking of doing is staying informed. I know we don't want to doom scroll too much. There's a lot out there that's going on right now, but making sure you know what's going on will help you deal with all of these things and help prevent future tragedies from happening. So one thing you want to do is make sure you're following reputable news organizations, which generally mean independent or not government owned, because there's always going to be some sort of bias. But even these independent news organizations, they will have their own bias, even if it's just this is the part of the world they live in. So there's going to be more news relating to that part of the world. So I do recommend that you try to follow news organizations that are from different parts of the world. It is work. Welcome to being an adult. So there's a couple places I like to get my news. Specifically for the war in Ukraine, I like to read the Kyiv Independent. I will link them below. I also get a lot of my news from Instagram. I should probably read more news articles, but hey, Instagram works for me. So if it works for you, here's a couple other things I follow. I like to follow With Ukraine on Instagram. They post a lot of President Zelensky's speeches. It's been really powerful to listen to his words. Even though I have to read the subtitles, it's powerful to get to hear the tone of his voice and see his body language. I also like to follow Kashim Rashid. He is a human rights lawyer from the state of Virginia. So there's been a lot of different things that he talks about in international and U.S. news. Sorry, y'all. I am an American, so of course all of my recommendations are going to be American specific. The next place I like to follow isn't actually American at all. I believe this account is from Canada. It's called Decolonize Myself on Instagram. So this is a repost account, which is actually kind of cool. So they are reposting posts from a bunch of different Indigenous activists. So once I started following this account, I was actually able to discover many new activists to follow, and that's one of the ways I've gotten to learn a lot over the past couple years. The last place I like to get my news, and I feel a little bit silly admitting this, but The Daily Show with Trevor Noah. It is a comedy show, but it's fairly well researched. They reference a lot of different issues happening, both internationally and in the US. And because it's a comedy show, it is a little bit more enjoyable to watch. And just because Trevor Noah is a mixed person, he comes from Africa, like he has a different angle on a lot of these issues, and hearing it from someone with a slightly different background, you're going to learn new things from that as well. So if you don't already watch him, highly recommend you add that to your queue. I also encourage you, yes, what is going on in Ukraine right now is horrible, but there's a lot of other injustices going on in the world right now, and there is unequal news coverage of them. So try and use what's going on right now in Ukraine as a gateway to understanding all of these other issues and what's going on. So, in case you hadn't heard, there is a recent attack on trans rights in Texas. But it's not just Texas. There are unfortunately other anti-trans laws trying to be passed in a couple other U.S. states. Earlier this week, Indiana Senator Mike Braun said that states should be able to ban interracial marriage. Fun times. There's also lots of refugees from other conflicts going on in like Syria and Yemen and Palestine. And people from these places are not receiving the same treatment. There is a huge inequity in how refugees from Ukraine are treated and refugees from pretty much everywhere else. And that is laying it really clear, a lot of the colorism and racism that we have going on in our global society. So I did a little bit of research and I found a couple of news articles for you all. Please take some time to read them. I did my best to make sure that they are from a variety of sources, but also from reputable sources. So this includes the Washington Post, the BBC, the New York Times, and Al Jazeera. There are also many different ways you can learn from flosstube. I recently discovered a wonderful video by Carolyn from Off the Grid Needle Arts. This is a little bit older video. She was responding to the insurrection that happened in the US on January 6th of last year, called Difficult Conversations Do Belong on flosstube. And I could not agree more. We need to change everyone from the ground up. These are important issues we need to be talking about. Yes, it is stressful. No, these aren't fun. This isn't fun for me either. But all of these issues, these are just people's lives. Trans rights aren't politics. That's just the lives of trans people. The inequity in refugee treatment, it's also not politics. That's things that real people have had to go through. So make sure that you are not straying away from these conversations and just saying, oh, I don't want to get political. No, these are people's lives, and we do need to talk about them. Fundamentally, we all want the same thing. We want to live and thrive and be able to be with people we love, have jobs, have health care, and not worry that we are going to be attacked or not have access to the things we need to live. So that's why it's important that we recognize all of these issues, that you start to educate yourself on issues that you may not personally have a connection to, and then seek to find similarity and solidarity with these other groups of people. Because if you try, there are ways to do that. There are also a couple different floss tubers I wanted to give a shout out to. The first one is Stitch with Susie. She did the most beautiful Ukraine special. So Susie is a lady living in the UK who's married to a wonderful Ukrainian gentleman. They lived in Ukraine together for, I believe, 5 years, and she has this beautiful video where she just takes us on a tour of all of the different artistic pieces she has based on Ukrainian traditions. So it was just the most beautiful lesson there. I also really enjoy watching Nitya of Daybreak Stitchery. She, of course, stitches many wonderful things, but throughout all of her videos, she will like discover something and do a little bit more research. And it's very multicultural, and she's actively learning more herself, and then she shares that with the rest of us. So I know I learn a lot from her, but it's also a great example of how you can be culturally responsible when you're navigating the world and all of these different types of patterns that we might have out there. Another great person to follow is Dee of Dee's 20 Stitches. Dee is trans and is also a designer, not a diner. I'm sure Dee also eats like we all do. So you can support them financially as well. Dee has many wonderful things they stitch and make, but what's even cooler is every single flosstube video, they include an educational component. So if you are not particularly knowledgeable on trans rights, Dee is a great resource for you. If you have made it this far, thank you so much. There's a lot of stressful things going on and it's not necessarily fun. So, thank you for giving me your time. And I wanted to give you the gift of sharing some of the feel good social media I follow. The first one is the Oregon Zoo. Their Instagram account is, they have like all of these adorable videos of like otters playing with ice cubes or red pandas eating. It is the best. Their social media team knows what they're doing. The other one is an account I actually just started following. I feel a little bit silly that I haven't followed them sooner, but it's Bodega Cats of Instagram, and it's just pictures of bodega cats. It's perfect. However, if you want to follow this account, you cannot be one of those people who calls a bodega simply a corner store. No, bodegas are more than corner stores. So if you want to follow that account, you have to. You have to admit that. Okay? Okay. And lastly, one thing I wanted to remind you is there's some really interesting research going on in psychology about how gratitude and how the act of showing gratitude to others actually changes your brain and positively affects mental health. So, one of the things I like to do when I need a little extra boost is I will start scrolling through Instagram, find other people who are stitching pretty things, and then just like write nice comments to them. So, do that yourself. Go out, say nice things to others. It will also help you. I'll link a nice article of that down below so you can give that a read. But this is also a shameless plug to remind you, give me a like and a comment. It really does matter knowing that other people like what I'm doing, that you're connecting, and that you appreciate it. So remember, whenever you're on FlossTube, like, comment, and subscribe. Anyway, I promise I will be doing a personal update soon, but I felt it was important to kind of separate this out into its own thing. Thank you all for being here. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your weekend.